Good news can often get overlooked or buried by the negative in our everyday lives. So let's change that. I'm Adrianna.
And I'm Wyatt.
We're just two ordinary people without any special qualifications or anything, trying to navigate life. We invite you to join us as we share wholesome stories, news articles of hope, and ideas about how we can all make the world just a little bit brighter. We are uplifting positive stories. Welcome back to another episode of Uplifting Positive Stories. Thanks for joining us.
It's good to be back again.
Yeah, we're excited for today's episode. It is about counteracting negativity. So,
remember, it's a positive podcast.
It's a positive podcast, but we got to talk about that there is negativity out there. And so we got to find ways to try to counteract it. And I'm not talking about toxic positivity, because that is a thing, but just trying to find ways.
Are you trying to say we're toxic positivity?
No. We're trying not to be.
Okay,
I hope we're not.
Let us know.
we don't want to be.
But listeners, you know that. We don't pretend the negativity doesn't exist out there.
No, because we know it all exists. And so we're just trying to find ways to make every day a little bit brighter and trying to find ways to counteract that negativity, because it's going to be out there. And the more we can do that for other people, I believe that the universe kind of brings that back to us, what we put out there. So if we're putting out stuff that's positive, try to counteract that negativity, hopefully that comes back to us as well. So
like a boomerang.
A
positive boomerang. And sometimes it whacks you across the head really hard, but sometimes
Right,
doesn't mean you shouldn't throw it.
Alrighty, well, we're
off to a good start here, guys.
All right, on to our first Reddit. It is funny. We're gonna go to our first Reddit story, which is from the thread Self. The title is, I keep thinking about my mom's kind act of service when I was 5. The more I think about it, the more I respect her. Here we go. When I was in kindergarten, my mom packed my lunch every single day. I had a nice lunchbox that matched my backpack, and she always made sure to pack foods I would actually eat. I refused to eat the school lunch until at least 3rd grade because I'm incredibly picky and I have sensory issues with textures/tastes.
That could be a challenge with school food sometimes, especially if it's a softer texture that's your issue.
Yeah,
good luck.
Right. One day, my class returned from a restroom break and my teacher found that the cabinet she kept all of our lunches in was opened. 2 lunchboxes were missing. Mine was one of them.
Lunchbox thieves.
I know. I didn't wrap my head around the fact that my lunch was gone and I'd likely have to eat whatever terrible thing the school was serving that day. I kind of just went about my day. I don't recall being anxious over it because even as young as I was, I knew my mom would fix it somehow. I was upset that my favorite lunchbox was stolen, but I managed to self-regulate the only time until my teenage years and just wait. The school called my mom and profusely apologized for my lunch being stolen. Turns out a little girl from another kindergarten class had snuck into my classroom while my class was out and stole my lunchbox because she was hungry. They found her with the missing lunchboxes and returned them, but they were already empty. My mom recalled this story to me years ago when I brought it up because I was thinking I made it up. Mental illness will get ya. It did happen, and this is the missing piece of the story from her perspective. When the school called to apologize, my mom said, I will bring her a new lunch. It's okay. The school promptly said that it was not okay, and my mom, who's worked with children longer than I've been alive, immediately said, if that little girl was hungry, then yes, it's okay. My mom did end up bringing me a new lunch that day. She didn't overreact or say anything bad about the kid. She knew that a kid had to be desperate and hungry to steal someone's food from another class while they're gone as to not get caught. Yes, we had school lunch, but it wasn't free, and not everyone has parents who can toss a juice box and a sandwich in a bag and call it a meal. Some might say that it's definitely not okay and that kid should have been punished, but my mom is a firm believer that children cannot fail, only parents. She's seen her fair share of bad apple children who might have deeper issues relating to behavioral disorders, but for the most part, it boils down to parenting. Some parents might be absolutely furious with a young child for stealing their kid's lunch, and I don't think that's necessarily right. Was it wrong to steal my food? Yes. But did this little girl do it just because she was trying to be mean? Likely not. She ate the food. She was hungry. My mom said it's okay for her to steal if she was hungry. My lunch might have been the only thing she had that day or even that week. When I was a teenager, I went through a horrible depression and I thought my mom was the worst person on earth. But anytime I recalled that story, I figured she might not be so bad. I'm 23 now, and my mom is my best friend. Not only because of that incident alone, but because this story is just a sliver of who she is as a person.
Hmm.
Yeah.
That's wow, understanding mom.
Right.
You know, I mean, so it does make sense if she's worked with kids before. Maybe she was a teacher. Maybe she was a different other career path, you know. But it is a sad reality that for some kids, well, I know they mentioned the story that like it comes down to bad parents and stuff. And sometimes it's, when it comes to this kind of stuff, it also relates to like socioeconomic status and economy. Cause like, you know, we're fortunate in Minnesota where kids' school lunches are all paid for now.
Yeah.
Like no one should have to worry about that issue anymore. Like that's a good thing that kids are being fed. Cause sometimes that's the only meal they might get that day, or
100%.
one of the only meals they'll get that day. And like, that's such an impact on kids' behaviors and development is
for sure
their ability to eat. And obviously, you know, there are bad apples out there when it comes to parents, but you know, sometimes it is what they can afford, and they can't afford a lot, and it's hard and it's sad. And so to have this mom realize, not without knowing the context, like she doesn't know if it's the parents or it's their economic status or what have you, just took the best, hey, they needed food, that's fine.
Yeah.
You know,
right.
And identifying that's the real problem here. It's not that it's a symptom of a larger problem.
Right. Exactly. But yeah, to not greet it with anger and frustration, it probably was, you know, an inconvenience having to pack another lunch and drive to the school and stuff. I'm assuming it was probably an inconvenience, especially if she had to like go off out of work for a little bit to go do that. Like, that's a bit inconvenient, but.
And it's also, I mean, the kid's in kindergarten, you know, so there's room to learn,
exactly.
You know, like who didn't do bad things when they were a kid?
Exactly. And I'm sure that when they
for worse reasons than I'm hungry.
Right.
Know?
And I'm sure when the kid was caught, I'm sure she was probably reprimanded right there and then by the teacher that caught her, being like, hey, you can't steal kids' lunches. And I'm sure that was embarrassing. Like, I would assume that she probably was embarrassed in that moment, and that enough will probably be like, oh, I probably shouldn't do that again.
Potentially emotionally traumatic, depending on how it was handled. Hopefully it was handled well. We're going to assume hopefully that it was.
Yeah. But and this kind of things happen a lot. Obviously, it's not always lunches, but like things, you know, that are not ideal happen. And sometimes people do things either whether intentionally or mistakenly that inconvenience us, that might make us frustrated. And when the world is like, no, we should tell them off and be like, you're a terrible person for doing this, or how could you be so dumb to do that kind of thing, and instead take what this mom did as an approach and turn it on its head and be like, no, I'm gonna choose the high road and I'm gonna do the right thing, and I'm gonna hope that this kid learned her lesson probably already from what just happened, and that if it was she was just hungry, then she got a free meal, and I'm going to be happy about that instead of upset, you know, and that's such a hard thing to do, especially when you're being inconvenienced. But if we could all do that and give people more grace in that regard, think about how much better the world would be, you know? Yeah,
just give people grace, which is a different episode, but it all relates.
But it all relates. It all ties together. All right, on to our next story. So this story is titled, Why Are Some People So Nice? And it is from the thread Self. The story says, I had to take an exam in front of the whole class, and I had a mental breakdown because I have been struggling with anxiety and depression, but nobody knows it at my school. I just received a message from a random girl I never talked to telling me it was all right, and the test wasn't important anyway. It made me feel so much better. And no, she isn't interested romantically in me, just wanted to share the story. To which someone commented, the world isn't all that good, but it's not that bad either, thankfully. Be sure to thank her for the gesture.
So what prompted this? The messaging of?
So this kid had to go and do an exam. So I'm assuming it was like a verbal exam in front of the class, and had a mental breakdown. Hard. I know, I hated those.
Regardless of your mental health, those suck for everybody.
Everyone hates them.
Those should end.
Yeah.
That should stop. It's just a shaming method for people who are not good at public speaking, which is most of us.
I mean, but it's a good skill to have, so I get it, but it's hard. It's really hard, especially, like, I did not enjoy doing that. But this kid did it, and they had a breakdown, and it sounds like it didn't do very well. They didn't feel like they did well. But then some random girl in their class just told them that they did all right, and that it wasn't that important of a test, and that they're okay. And it made them feel a lot better. We always wonder what's going on in other people's heads, and usually things are worse in our own head than they actually are. I know that from experience. Like, I remember there were times where I was like, oh, I bombed that. Oh, I'm going to get such a bad grade. Like, I did horrible. And then later found out that I actually got a pretty okay grade on it. Because in our heads, we make things seem so much worse than they are. And so
but sometimes you do fail.
And sometimes that happens. But for that,
you can still give a reassuring
student
words.
To then go out of their way to be like, hey, I want you to know that you did all right, and it's not that big a deal. Like, don't be so hard on yourself. I think that's so, so huge. And what a great what a great student to do that.
Yeah, and I have to say, like, this is something I realized, or maybe I like to hope, at least I thought growing up, that it was a sign of like, hey, I have empathy. But one of the most hardest things to witness is somebody crashing and burning in public speaking or a performance of some kind. It just tears at you, like, oh no, come on, you're sitting there quietly, like, come on, you can do it, you can do it.
Because you kind of see yourself in their shoes.
Yeah, whether it's a speech, presentation, or when I used to judge martial arts tournaments and stuff, like a foreign performance that they're putting on, they're just stumbling around their maneuvers and they're kind of freezing up, especially with kids. It's hard. It's like, come on, you can do this, you can do this. And even as adults too, I remember that happened a couple times in our argumentation class with the debates, because they were big debates and they were stressful and they were scary. And a couple times there were people who kind of freeze up a little bit, because it was a scary class, and with the scary debates that were really, really intense, and you just want to cheer for them, people to be able to succeed. And and I don't know, I think that's good to then follow up and like, hey, you did fine.
Yeah, it's not that big of a deal. It's not as big as you think. Yeah. I know that, like, I've had moments where things similar to that have happened. I used to be a singer, and I used to, like, do competitions, and I also used to do performances. And I remember there was one time where there was a big performance, and I was really excited, and I practiced a ton. And I did not know this, that you're not supposed to drink hot chocolate before you sing, because it can really mess up your vocal cords. Because I had it with milk, so it was really thick, and milk is also apparently very bad. Did not know that. I was like 9 at the time. And got up there and had the worst frog in my throat that I could not clear no matter how hard I tried. And so I just could not get the notes out, and I was so embarrassed. But I just remember that there was this girl that was there, that she was like 4 years older maybe at the time, and so I looked up to her and I was like, I want to be like her when I get to like middle school and high school, because she's a great singer and she's really confident. And I remember her coming up to me and she said to me, it ain't no thing like a chicken wing. And that was her thing. She's like, hey, this is just a small performance, you're fine, like it happens to the best of us, like we have off days with our voice, it's never gonna be perfect, the vocal cord is a crazy thing and little things can mess it up. And then my voice teacher later was like, did you eat or drink anything before you did? And I was like, yeah, hot chocolate. And she was like, that's the worst thing you could have had. She's like, that's it right there.
I bet you never.
So don't do that ever again. And I was like, all right.
I bet you never do that
again.
But
she was super nice about it. But that girl going out of her way and saying, it ain't no thing like a chicken wing. And that's always kind of gone through my head ever since then when something's gone wrong. Because we blow things up worse than it is. But to be able to be that person in that moment for somebody when they feel like everything just blew up and like it went horribly and they're embarrassed, and that negative moment that you're in, and to take it and turn it on its head and be like, it's not that big a deal, you'll be okay. Just having that little voice in your head to counteract that can really make a difference.
Yeah, and it's easy now looking back, because now we can easily establish looking back what actually mattered, what didn't matter.
Right.
Of all the things we go back, like that didn't matter. Like 90% of specific tests, didn't really matter that much in the grand scheme of things. Not to the extent that like, this is world ending. Oh no, I failed, or I'm gonna fail. I'm never gonna recover from this.
Exactly. So. But
here we are. Somehow we did.
Exactly. Our next story here is a news article, and it is from HuffPost, and it is titled, After Woman Called This Mom a Whale, She Responded by Paying for Their Coffee.
Wow.
Yeah, right? Okay, so this mom...
People are mean.
Yeah, so this mom was with her 2-year-old daughter at a Tim Hortons in Michigan, and while she was in line, there were two women behind her that were whispering about her looks and calling her a whale. To quote her, she said she overheard, "Oh, look at her hair, it's nasty looking and the roots are coming in." Apparently, the woman who was having these things said about her had, to quote the article, recently lost 177 pounds after being diagnosed with congestive heart failure and was crushed by the cruel comments. So that was pretty sad and rough. But she decided, because her daughter looks up to her so much, she's a little 2-year-old, that she didn't want to go off on them. And so instead, she bought their coffees for them and paid for it. Which, I'm like, wow. She then told the story on her Facebook page, and all of a sudden got flooded with people trying to friend request her and liking her post. She had 166,000 people like her post and 94,000 friend requests in response from moms that were also being like, what a way to show your kid how to respond when someone does something horrible to you, and like taking the high road despite that. So yeah, and then
Kill
last
them with
thing,
kindness.
right? Last
And a
thing
poison
that she
coffee.
said.
Just kidding.
No. Last thing she said, to quote the article, was, "Just when you think there's no one nice in the world, they're all on my Facebook page." So yeah, because that's a good point. You know, I think social media can be so great and it can be so terrible. It can be so divisive because people can hide behind their screens and can say a lot of really cruel things. And that can be it can be a bad thing, but sometimes it's a place for a lot of people to flood support. And you see like GoFundMe pages that are going viral and people helping and donating and helping people out. You see people that are liking and commenting, being like, "Yeah, you go, girl," on posts like that she just posted. So there is both sides, and again, it's just about being supportive on the good side and not feeding into the negative side where people are flocking to and trying to, I don't know, get jabs in there, because there is that element for sure. So I was just baffled by this story. I was like, whoa, I don't know if I could respond that way if I were in that situation. Like, that's horrible.
Yeah.
I cannot even imagine. So for her to do that and then pay for their coffees, like, wow, you have to be really strong as a person to do that. And so, yeah, something we can all aspire to. Because again, I don't know. I would probably just be really embarrassed and want to get the heck out of there. And I'd be like probably crying on the way home. Like, so the fact that she did that, and hopefully her little daughter would notice that, you know, who knows if she's, you know, old enough to really recognize what just happened, but to be able to take that
I
message.
do think, I mean, maybe she wouldn't remember per se, but that would be like a traumatizing moment if she were to like flip out on them in front of her.
100%.
Like,
if it was gone the other direction.
Yeah, even if she doesn't remember it later, like directly, that would have an impact if you just blew up at them.
Right.
You know?
So yeah, it just.
So at the very least, it didn't do any harm, and maybe had
and it'll probably be a story later.
Them.
I mean, the fact that it went viral on Facebook, I'm sure that'll come up at some point in their life that happened, and that they went viral on Facebook for that, and I'm sure she'll see that and be like, wow, my mom was a really strong person, and I want to be like that, you know? So it's a good inspiration.
And hopefully the people that she gave the coffee to feel horrible, and then, at least in that moment, feel horrible, and then use that feeling to make changes to not treat people that way and not talk to people like that, you know? I'm not saying I hope they feel horrible because I'm a spiteful, vengeful person. I think because sometimes that feeling of, oh, I'm horrible, like what I did was bad, because sometimes you do need that feeling of like, wow, I did a really bad thing. That was awful. I need to pivot and change, you know? Because we're human, we make mistakes, we learn, especially when we're younger. I think we've talked about in the podcast before about sometimes foot and mouth syndrome. You say comment meaning it one way is taken another way completely, or you're just oblivious to how it's impacting somebody else, and then you get that information brought to you. And I mean, I think in this situation, I hope they would know better, but maybe this is the smack in the face they needed. That's like, oh wow, maybe I shouldn't talk so openly about people like that. Right. So especially so negatively.
Yeah, 100%. I do think too that sometimes when we do react in a very kind way that's unexpected, when someone has directly been rude to us or mean, it's so unexpected that sometimes it can shock their system a little bit, and that they might go like, oh, I feel even worse now than if we had just like told them off for being bad. Because I noticed that a few times when I was working in customer service and someone was really mad about something and they decided that I was the one they were going to tell they were mad about this thing. Yeah. They would go off like you were the problem and would just be really rude and mean. And that would happen sometimes. And so you had to kind of learn to just like, it's not actually about me. They're acting like it's about me, but it's about the thing, you know, that they just got mad about. So that would happen. And I just remember there were quite a few instances when I would try my best to respond very nicely, and I'd be like, oh, I'm so sorry that happened to you. Like, let's try to make it right. And I would be like, I'm so sorry. Like, oh, that's such a bummer that happened. Like, be like empathetic to the situation, and then try to find a way to make it right. Like, I was a manager, so we'd give out free movie passes or things like that. And I just remember after them like being so blatantly rude to me and that happening, like the look of just like, oh, I don't know what to do now, because now you're being nice in response to me yelling at you. And now I'm just like, oh, I feel terrible. Like, and now I'm like, oh, thank you so much. Oh, thank you. Like, you know, they're so taken aback by the kindness that it kind of flips it completely. And yeah, so I think that there is something to be said that if you react in a nice way back, that sometimes it can have an even more powerful response than if you just were like, hey, I don't appreciate that, which that's a good way to respond to. But sometimes if we respond with kindness or flip it on its head, it can be even better. So, like, on a personal note too, we know, and we're not strangers to the fact that we're putting this on the internet, and so like there could be mean comments, there could be negativity that happens because of things we say, because we're putting ourselves out there, and that's a scary thing. And so that was a thing that prevented me from doing this for a very long time, because I was worried about that, and I still have a worry about that, but I'm trying to get past it. And I will say, like, already there was one comment, and it wasn't necessarily mean, it was just maybe not from like the nicest point of view. It wasn't.
It's over a comment, so we don't
know how
what
the tone
was,
but it wasn't necessarily nice. And
at best it was maybe neutral.
Yeah, exactly. It was fine, but somebody decided to kind of counteract that and said something that was very positive and nice in response to that. And so if you're that person that did that, thank you. It really, really made my day.
And several people liked it too.
I know. little boost. And so that was super, super nice to that person that did that. So if you're listening, thank you so much. You made my day. And
you're a hero. Nothing that dramatic, but it was nice.
But it was just very, very nice. And it just made my day. So I wanted to put that out there as well. All right, one more news article here. This one made me really happy. So this one is also from HuffPost. It is titled, "First Graders Write Adorable Notes of Forgiveness to Devastated Vikings Kicker." So Blair Walsh visited North Point Elementary to talk with these first graders. To quote him, it says, "The fact that people like you, kids like you, are willing to do kind things like that for somebody you don't even know, it really meant a lot to me, and I just want to say thank you." So apparently he was supposed to do a routine 27-yard field goal, and it was supposed to just fly through the post. Well, the kick sailed wide left, and so Minnesota saw its playoff dream slip through its fingers, with its season officially ending just moments later. So it was a season-ending blunder.
Forgot, trigger warning for Vikings fans who are disappointed by our... I'm not even a big football fan, but I'm aware of the Vikings' continue last-minute disappointment of what should have been... This is from what I've heard. Anyways, trigger warning. Delayed.
Right. So anyways, Blair Walsh was very devastated. To quote the article, he was claiming responsibility for the loss amid tears of regret. His teammates tried to make him feel better, but it wasn't helping. And so a teacher at North Point Elementary in Blaine, Minnesota decided that this was a teachable moment. And so she had them all write letters of understanding to this NFL player. So to read some of the letters, here's what they say. Number 1, "You are handsome. Don't worry, it's just a game." Number 2, "One time I had the same problem as you, and we lost the divisional playoffs. You rock." Number 3, "Dear Blair Walsh, I know that it can be hard to get through things that are sad, but you have to try and try again. Everyone makes mistakes sometimes. One time I made a mistake when I was doing a cartwheel. I felt embarrassed. You can still help the Vikings win the Super Bowl next year." Couple more. "Dear Blair Walsh, you are the best player in the world. Everyone makes mistakes, but I had a missed basket before." And then the last one. "For Blair Walsh, keep on trying. Puppies are cute." To quote the article, "They are indeed, Tasha. They are indeed." Wise, kind words from Tasha, Sophia, and the rest of these elementary schoolers.
Yeah. Well, I mean, obviously, I imagine it was disappointing for Vikings fans
100%.
and the Vikings teams, especially when it's your profession, it's your career and stuff.
Oh, yeah. There's a lot of pressure.
Things that are going to happen are going to be what they are. It was nice that people were, understand that, hey, you're human. Mistakes happen, especially in high pressure situations. And who knows? Maybe he was meant to miss that to maybe teach other people that, hey, it's okay to mess up sometimes, or hey, sometimes mess up. I know years ago when I was younger and I used to follow a lot more like competitive martial arts, like forms of competition stuff. One guy who was like the #1 world champion at the time, Kalman Shoka, who did double sword routines and came to Diamond Nationals just like once a year in Minnesota, big international tournament. And he was performing and he did a trick and he messed up the trick, dropped the sword. When you mess up, you're instantly disqualified. But I remember, even though I was very like, it shook me. I don't know why. It shook me to my core at the time. Like I was like emotionally devastated for some reason, seeing someone you look up to mess up. But I do remember he picked it up and he kept going. Even though he was disqualified, he picked it up, he kept going, finished the routine. He came back next year and won, no problem whatsoever.
That's
like
awesome. Mistakes
happen. Even though it was so stupid, but I was so emotionally destroyed that night because I was so excited to watch him perform and he messed up. And, but it teaches you that, hey, like you can mess up sometimes. You can make a mistake. It's how you respond to it. That means everything.
100%.
Like if he made that kick goal and then he just like, I don't know how he responded to it, but I can imagine there's some bad ways you could respond to that.
100%.
Like he gets so angry and starts like hitting somebody, like that's like extreme. That never happened. But like there are very much wrong ways you could respond to a situation like that.
Quitting your career.
Yeah, you could quit your career over that.
Yeah, 100%.
That'd be a shame, potentially.
Another really great example of that is Idina Menzel, which if you don't know, Idina Menzel was Elphaba and Wicked on Broadway for a very long time. She was also Elsa in Frozen, so she's a very, very talented singer, very seasoned, and she sings some songs that are incredibly challenging to sing. And in a reel that I saw, she was in a live performance, and she was doing Let It Go, this title song in Frozen, and she was belting out that last note, and her voice just failed. Like, just hardcore, was not correct. And it was like, ooh. And she literally stopped mid-song and was like, I'm so sorry. That was not the note. My voice did not do that. And she was like, hang on, let me try it again. And she tried it 3 times and it was not working. And she's like, sometimes your voice just doesn't want to do it. And it's a really hard note. And finally, she's like, everyone wants to sing it with me. Let's do it. And she did it. And she finally got it. Mm-hmm. And stuff, and she just kind of laughed about it and was like, we got there. Sometimes things are really hard. Mm-hmm. And so it happens. Even like the most seasoned singers, the most seasoned NFL players, everyone makes mistakes. And so when someone makes a mistake, whether it's a professional thing or it's something in daily life that inconveniences you, how we respond to that can make or break their experience in life and can really impact them either very positively or very negatively. If we respond to it positively and counteract that negativity when someone has a moment like that by being positive and by lifting them up and saying things that are positive words of encouragement, mm-hmm. or like it's not that big of a deal, like it really isn't, or like the fans being like, it's all good, like no worries, you messed up that note, it's all good, we still love you, responding like that to everybody, and then also doing that for ourselves as well, and not beating ourselves up over things when things don't go well and when things are negative, mm-hmm. or when someone says something mean, and not taking it to heart and try to counteract that. Like if someone were to say something mean to you, try to counteract it in your head and verbally tell yourself like, no, that's not true. I mm-hmm. am this. And like try to counteract it yourself mm-hmm. until you believe it.
Yeah.
And that's so hard to do, as everything is on this podcast. It's not easy, but the more we can do it, I feel like the better our self-esteem will be and the better other people's self-esteem will be.
Mm-hmm. And there's a few ways, we talked about a couple here. There's one, there's responding to negativity done by others. Mm-hmm. If someone has wronged somebody in your eyes, and you can show some kindness, to counteract that. And there's also, your own negativity too. Like I know, say whether it's a friend or something, they make a disparaging comment about themselves, you can try to counteract that. I know in D&D sometimes we have a couple friends that like on occasion, if things are not going their way or something, or they're not performing the way they envisioned, and they're like, oh, my character sucks, so they're not good. I'm like, no, your character's great, and I think come up with reasons why their character's great. I'm not just making stuff up. That's actually true. Like,
right.
Oh, my character sucks. I don't think they're very powerful. No, your character is. It's just in this way and that way. Like yep. There's counteracting their own negativity. Now I can't speak to like if they're still enjoying the character, but that's a whole different conversation. But in terms of like, oh, my character sucks, or if it could be any disparaging comment about yourself. We all have those insecurities, and we all have things that we're unsure about, and just kind of like, no, you're great. No, you are like fun to be around, or, you are awesome.
Yeah.
Trying to counteract that.
With that, we will end today's episode. Thank you so much for joining us today. Next week's episode is all about giving gifts. And we have some very wholesome stories about people that gave really cute gifts to people and very, very awesome reactions to them. So I'm excited to share them, and it'll be super, super fun. If you have positive stories or news articles that you find that have a hopeful theme to them, please feel free to send them to us at upliftingpositivestories@gmail.com. And then also you can share them on our Reddit thread, Uplift Positive Stories.
And if you're watching us on YouTube, make sure to hit that like and subscribe button, or leave a comment. Hopefully a positive one, please.
Thank you guys so much for joining us. We hope you'll join us next Wednesday, and have a great week.
And stay positive.